So you have this brutal 2-year battle, and at the end of it, Mike steps down. How did that happen?
Well, it was brutal. I mean, I haven't described, I think, the flavor of life on campus between 86 and 88, and it was awful. And I didn't want to come to work a lot of days. It was so, faculty were totally demoralized. They just felt, again, that the university did not care about them and didn't care about its mission to educate. It just wanted to win. And an awful lot of things had been destroyed or badly damaged, I don't mean physically, in the process. But ultimately, the accreditation agency was the straw that broke the trustees' back. And we had this victory, at which point Mike called us together, called the executive board together, and he said, you know, I always intended to retire from the presidency after we bargained the 86 contract. I just didn't think it was going to take us 2 years to do. But now I'm really done, I'm tired, and it's time for somebody else to take over. And Alan, it's you. And I went, oh really? Wait, you know, which Alan do you have in mind? I mean, I was vice president, so there was a kind of logic to it, but I truly had not wanted it. My wife had to talk me into it, ultimately. It seemed like too big a burden and so on. And it is, as you know, a burden. Also many pleasures in it, but it's hard work and often frustrating. So we had an election. It was not unanimous. There was, again, one of the let's get rid of the union boys and get some old-fashioned faculty back in charge. A gentleman from the economics department ran against me, but I won comfortably, if not overwhelmingly. And then we had to figure out what to do next. Now, what helped us enormously was that, as I may have already said, they appointed a new provost, Father Clark. And I was sitting in my tiny little faculty office on the 5th floor of University Center one afternoon, not long after I'd been elected, and there was a very timid little knock on the door. Got to be a student who wants an extension for a paper, right? The door opens, it's Father Clark. Alan, would you mind if I came in? I said, please. First time any major administrator had sought out the union leader to talk seriously. And Father Clark said, Alan, tell me what the university looks like from your point of view. And I said, are you sure you want to know? Have you got a couple hours? Is your chair comfortable? He said, fire away. And I unloaded. And I talked about all of the mismanagement that had occurred from our point of view and the foolish damage that had been caused by this mismanagement. And I said candidly, you know, the union has some of the blame, but the administration has the overwhelming share of the blame. We want the university to thrive and prosper. We want USF to do well. I'm not sure all of the administrators on the other side have the same goal. In any case, they haven't behaved that way. And so I described the university as I saw it, and he's nodded, and he said, Alan, sounds about right to me, but you and I are going to fix it. The war is over. And I said, great, that's all we've ever wanted. And over time, because we were very, very different personalities, he was shy and retiring and thoughtful and meditative, and I'm loud and obnoxious. And I don't think Father Clark is Jewish or was Jewish, although I'm not sure. So there was a kind of a cultural divide, which was very quickly bridged, and we formed, I think, a very, very good working relationship, and piece by piece by piece. I mean, first we had to persuade people that they weren't going to put down their weapons and then get sniped. You know, so we had to reassure people and so on. And then came time to bargain the 88 contract already, or the 89, whatever it was. And at that point, WASC had issued its report and had said the faculty is no longer collegial, and it needs to be collegial. Now, WASC did not understand collective bargaining, and frankly was hostile to collective bargaining. So they didn't get it, but that's what they said. So the university came to us with some proposals about giving the faculty more, not real power, it never is, but more consultative role, including restoring peer review, which we had not had for a decade. And it was the university administration that was insisting on this, and it's we who were resisting it. And we said, partly we're resisting it on principle. I don't think peer review is a great idea. I never have. I'd be happier without it, but that's And I think we did fine without it, but anyway, that's another story. It makes me a heretic among my professional colleagues, but that's what I think. But also, the more consultative rights we had, the more we were backing into the yeshiva propeller. You can't have those rights, you'll be decertified. And we said, if we're going to bargain these with you, we have to have in the contract something that says you won't invoke yeshiva. So there's a so-called yeshiva bar in the contract now, early on in the contract, that says, and it's remained, I think it's remained intact from then to now, maybe there have been a tweak or two, but I think it's essentially the same. And it says even if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck and has feathers like a duck, the university will agree that the faculty is not a duck, namely a union, namely a management, and therefore is not going to interfere with your right to bargain collectively. So that allowed us to bargain some collegial and collaborative procedures and states of the faculty and so forth. And that took a long time because everybody was leery of it. So that was a lot of the first, I don't know, decades' work. And then the other challenge was that we'd held our economic position as a faculty during the previous 13 years, but only just. We had remained kind of where we were, which was kind of lower end of the spectrum. We hadn't gone backward, and that's all thanks to Mike.
Yeah.
But we hadn't gone forward, partly because the university was in economic distress. Now come the late 80s and 90s where economic times in America are better, and so economic times for the university are better. Enrollment is finally going up, attrition is finally going down because people are working at this. And so I was able, I'm glad to say, to help to bargain, and it takes two to tango. The university bargained these two. Support for the faculty, like a greatly increased faculty development fund that we talked about, like a child care fund, like a housing subsidy, we doubled management's contribution to pension, and so on and so forth. So that the faculty was able to move from where it had been frozen, kind of at the lower end of things, to where we belong, which is competitive with some of the best universities in California and in the country. But that took, I mean, I was president for 17 years, from 88 to 05, and it took most of that time to get there, and there's still some things I wish we could have achieved that we didn't. But in general, those were the challenges. So on the one hand, it was making the war over, constructing a truce that everybody believed in and felt safe with. That took a long time. Enhancing faculty rights, consultation rights, and enhancing faculty economic position. And that was what had to be done. And behind that, of course, was holding the union together now that the war was over. Because there's nothing that unites a group like a common enemy. If that enemy largely disappears, there were still a few villains here and there on campus, but if the enemy largely disappears, the temptation is to go right off and pretend you're a rugged individualist and don't need the collective whole. And so it's been a struggle to try to, and you've had the same struggle, to try to keep all of the faculty on board because it looks like everything's just fine now. And you and I both know that at any moment there can come a financial or some other kind of a crisis, and the university can just decide, oh, well, we're not going to do that anymore. And if you don't have a binding contract that's enforceable, you're helpless. But I have to say that the last two presidents have been,
USF presidents.
USF presidents, yes, thank you, have not been hostile to the union. Well, you can talk about your experience. I will say that the president who came in was it 90 or 91, Father Schlegel, who was there for a decade. So he was there for most of the rest of my term, and then Father Pravet came in for the last 3 or 4 years. And I will say that I did not encounter from Father Schlegel ever the kind of broad gauge assault or sabotage or whatever that we'd been used to for the previous 15 years.